All right, so here we go. This is a program that we lovingly call Past the Cemetery Gate. It is the graveyard as a genealogical resource. You will come exploring with us, the Gravestone Girls. And remember that part where I said, oh, I know how to do this? There we go. I actually did. My frame was frozen for a minute, but we got it. So, Gravestone Girls, three lovely ladies over here. That's me. I'm Brenda, Petunia, and Gigi. Call me whatever you like. This is Web Mistress Zipporah. This is my beloved Melissa. She takes care of all of our social media and website online on every platform. She is the reason we have the technology that we do. And this party person down here, my conventionalist, that is Maggie. She is my best friend since the age of way back when. And Maggie and I, we all live in, all three of us live in Massachusetts. Maggie and I live in Central Mass, and Melissa grew up out in Western Mass. And together and separately over many years, we have been touring the graveyards together. Gravestone Girls' mission is to keep our dead alive by preserving cemetery art and history. You know this by now, shameless self-promotion, www.gravestonegirls.com. Gravestone Girls do a bunch of different things. We do presentations like these. We want to educate you and share what we know and what we see out on the road about the history underneath your feet. In times of less social distancing, we do cemetery walking tours, so actual physical walking tours in the cemeteries near and far. Over here on the left is an example of a gravestone rubbing. We teach gravestone rubbing classes, and I'm not going to talk about any of that tonight, the do's, the don'ts, the rules, all of that. I am working to put together a program like this one so that everybody could drop in and will actually be able to talk about gravestone rubbing, the pros and cons, as well as the rules. And if I'm really, really good with my technology, I will be able to give you guys a proper gravestone rubbing demonstration, because really that's the key. Proper gravestone rubbing is a completely inert process, but you need some knowledge before you get out and do it. And then certainly the last thing on the list, but probably one of the best things, if you ask me, gravestone replicas like these beauties, examples over here. Oh, hey, look at that. They are gravestone castings. They are elements from larger gravestones, mostly from the colonial period, all from New England, that we make replicas of. That is what we trade in, and that is what you will find when you go to gravestonegirls.com or any of the markets that we participate in. They are all to size, so they are the size of the element that is on the overall stone. They all have hooks to hang on the back, hooks on the back so that you can hang them somewhere. And they all come with a history card that says who they are, where they're from, plus information about the symbol and its meaning. So the idea of this program is to teach you a bunch of different things. And the first basic thing is the difference between a graveyard and a cemetery. There actually is a difference in the terminology. It has to do with time period. And that landscape that you look at when you're out there, that is a very big clue to the time frame that that space was developed in, as well as the social period that brought it together, that enabled it to be created. When you go into the first period here in New England is the colonial period, and when you will find places that look like this, and we talked about this, any of you that sat in the last program, I used this slide because it's very, very good example. So this is a colonial period graveyard. It's also called a burying ground, burying hill, those kind of words. They're not cemeteries yet. So they come into being in the New England area in the 1600s from first settlement up, and look like this up through the 1700s. My questions on the right say, how do I find it? What do I see when I get there? And then what changes to a town cause changes in the burial ground? So those kind of all go together. When you come into a town, particularly an old New England town, and you're looking for the old burial ground, you will try to look for things like this up here, this sign. We have a lot of these in New England that mark the spot of the early meeting house. A lot of the rules about getting a charter in New England to start a town often had to do, one of the requirements, or two of the requirements, was to establish a meeting house and a burial ground. So very often that burial ground is going to be in very close proximity to the original location of the original meeting house. Over time, that meeting house changes. It might become your town hall. It might then become your city hall. It might go away altogether, and you end up with something that looks like this down below, that big, beautiful white steepled church that we are so famous for here in New England, may actually rest on the original foundation of the meeting house. When the settlers got here, they weren't building churches, they were building meeting houses. They used the meeting house certainly for religious purposes, but also for other social and civic services as well. When you look at that old burial ground, what you see is absolutely different from the way it was when it was first put in. It has certainly changed over time. And the changes to the town cause changes to the burial ground. So you'll notice these are nice, neat rows. At some time, they have been reorganized for aesthetic reasons. They've been reorganized for groundskeeping purposes. They've been reorganized as town grows and changes. If these spaces are in the middle of town and you put in a road or you widen a road that's already there, it very often will eat into this burial space, sometimes causing it to become smaller, sometimes causing it to disappear altogether, whether it is buried under or actually moved. So there's a lot of factors that go in over time that change the look of this landscape. But you can pretty much go from town to town to town in the New England area if they date through the 1700s and find an old burial ground that looks like this. So in those beautiful old burial grounds, we have these lovelies. This is a late colonial period headstone. And I say late colonial period because they don't actually start showing up on the landscape in these organized burial grounds until the last quarter of the 1600s. They are typically geologically made out of slate or sandstone because those are very locally available, easy to find, easy to quarry materials. And the idea of this headstone is symbolically that it is your part of your bed for eternity. Look at my beautiful creature there. It makes me so happy. The second period is the rural or the garden cemetery movement that happens in the early 19th century. We get a complete departure from that colonial landscape that we looked at. And we have many that look like this that start springing up over time. The first one is 1831 is Mount Auburn Cemetery in Watertown/Cambridge, Massachusetts. They are modeled on the idea of the Père Lachaise Cemetery and other garden cemeteries in France. And they are also influenced at the time by writers of the time that are the Hawthornes and the Thoreaus and the Longfellows and all those guys, and Byron writing stories and poetries about nature, about mortality, about communing with nature, about love and death and sorrow. These spaces are influenced by that. They're also often created to be arboretums as well. And that's what Mount Auburn was when it was founded in 1831. It was both a place to bury your dead and an arboretum, open green space, a place for the people to come and commune with the living, because these were very social places, and as well as visit the deceased, keep them as part of your family, even though they are no longer physically there. And they can certainly do the communing with nature thing. You also have the influence of, at the time, through the 19th century, of the spiritualists, so the transcendentalists and the spiritualists doing their ghost talks and their automatic writing and working with Ouija boards, and the idea overall through the Victorian period in the 19th century that the veil between this world and the next is very thin, and it's very easy to move from one place to another. These cemeteries have markers, as you can see, that look very different. They're all different shapes and sizes. They're also made out of newfangled materials for the time, so particularly marble and granite. So the white ones you see on the landscape here, down here, over here, those are marbles. And then you've got all of these other lovelies that are made out of granite. And the granite starts showing up later in the 1800s because we then have the technology, the tools and the factories and the machinery to be able to get granite, which is a very, very hard rock, comes out of the molten core of the earth, get that rock out of the ground and turn it into usable objects, both grand in terms of large architectural structures, but also more common or mundane, such as gravestones. And then the third period is the modern cemetery landscape of the 20th and the 21st century. So looking at this in comparison to the last two locations we saw, they're very different again. So there is a change from the busyness that marked the Victorian period. We want to return this landscape to be more pastoral, more farm-like, easy on the eye. It blends better into the overall landscape that surrounds it. The material becomes dominantly granite. We have a lot of rules that come into play about what you can and can't do on these landscapes. The cemetery organizations make their rules. It has a lot to do with keeping a certain visual aesthetic, and it also has to do with groundskeeping and manpower and space, and time is money. So we have to be very efficient in how we take care of these spaces. So in this program, we are going to use the cemetery to journey through time. We're going to use it to find information on the past and the present. We will use both direct and indirect information right from the faces of the tombstones to figure out what's going on. So direct being what we can read, and indirect is what we can deduce from doing a little bit of thinking, maybe some calculations, and finding some other starting points to then move on with digging up more information. No pun intended. Finding this information reveals a picture not only of the individual, that person for whom that gravestone is created for, and also for the families, but also really society as it is at a particular point in time, and society's influence on how the gravestones, the symbols, the messages, and the overall landscape looks. So direct information that you can find on the faces of stones. All kinds of things. Here are just a few. So identities, we get names, we can read ages, we can read the gender, we can read the direct relation because it will say wife, mother, father. We can gain information, chart information about marriages, adoptions. We can find out who these people were as individuals because those gravestones may say what they did with themselves in life, what were their achievements, where did they go to school, what did they do for work, who were they as individual people and as members of society. Also, many stones will show you military service and show you branches and ranks and all of that kind of stuff, including often where they served or vessels they served on, or not just a high level which branch of the military. We'll also be able to see hobbies and interests. What were people doing with themselves when they weren't going to school or working or serving in the military? We will also be able to identify fraternal and social affiliations. So these are organizations you're all very familiar with, I'm sure. The Freemasons, the Odd Fellows, the Lions, the Grange, all that kind of stuff. We're going to see a bunch of different logos for them, and some will be familiar to you, and maybe some will be new. Gravestones will also say on their faces place of origin. Where did people come from? And also, where did they die? And last but not least, my favorite would be method of death. Not just place of death, but what happened? How did they die? Very, very often that information is on the face of the stone, and it will have a lot to do with the reason it's put on there is often has a lot to do with the time period of that particular gravestone and that time period of society, because it's meant to message to the living. We have deductive information that we can glean from these as well, with just a little bit of detective work. We can identify family ties and familial associations. Who's who? Who's related to whom? We can see how many marriages there are, who gets married, who gets remarried, and resulting children, brothers, sisters, siblings, halves, adopted, all those kind of family relations. And certainly with those multiple marriages, we get age gaps between husbands and wives. And as it seems to me, when I see them, particularly in the colonial period, and with good reason, the older the husbands get, the younger the wives become. Other deductive information, things we can do from information from the gravestone about disease, well, we might be able to start looking for and identifying a pattern of outbreaks or diseases that may have moved through a community at a particular point in time. We will be able to do some deductive reasoning to maybe figure out something that may have happened particular to a family, some sort of tragedy that causes a number of people to be in the cemetery die on a particular day. And certainly we can figure out movement, so points of origin, where do we come from and where do we go, where did we travel to, where did we end up. Now, I can't give you a list that says this is the deductive stuff and this is the intuitive stuff. They really work together. So I blended them for you into a number of large categories, and then I'm going to show you examples from there. It's really hot. I need a lot of iced tea, so pardon my pauses. So this first slide, the topic would be identities and familial ties. Who's who? Who married who? Who's born to who? And one of the things, particularly with the 19th century burial grounds, cemeteries, you have the benefit of having a family plot. In the 19th century, this is the first time families are able to buy a piece of property that is their burial space. It's delineated, it's a plot, it's a certain size, and you will go from this life one by one into the family plot where you'll all be reunited. So you very often will have a cluster of stones with family members all together, and the faces of those stones are going to tell me who they are, how they're related to each other. We find all sorts of things that identify families on gravestones, and particularly on the colonial period, I find more often than not, periodically, I will find heraldry. So I'll find a coat of arms. I will find the family crest. So the coat of arms is the whole thing. Get my pointer up here. The coat of arms is this whole thing. So it's tough to tell what's what. This is a piece of slate, and the crest is the piece, like the word implies, the crest is at the piece at the top. So I've got a helmet here with feathers. I've got some royal animals up there. I've got some flourishes. I got a whole bunch of stuff going on. I believe I've got a crown in there and a cross. So if I came upon this particular one and I didn't know what it was, well, they made it easy for me, because down here, coat of arms. So I will have the family name, and now I have the family coat of arms. So I can go online, and so much of this obviously is available online, and I can start doing research on. There's plenty of heraldry groups. I can start doing research on the family. I can do research on the coat of arms. I can then find out where that coat of arms is. Where does that family hail from? I can start with this one piece of information and go pretty deep down. I get visual identification on gravestones as well. It's going to be from the 19th century forward. I will end up showing you a air quote picture on colonials gravestones, but they are not of the individual. But come the 19th century, when I see images of people on gravestones and moving forward into the 20th and 21st century, I can bank on it that I am looking at an image of the individual that's there in that grave, in that family lot. Up on my left, what I've got is a bas relief, cast bronze implanted into that large piece of granite, and there's no doubt in my mind that is an image of the patriarch of that particular family. Over on your right, this round, pretty, she is called a photo ceramic. So it is a piece of ceramic that has a photo put on the face of it and then laminated, so you can see it's got a little gloss to it, so it's actually been sealed over to protect the photo. And they can be put flush to the stone, so it can be embedded like that, or it can be applied to the outside of the stone without actually being cut in and laid into the stone. Down here on my left, I've got what's called an etching. So this is a very modern thing. This is a very 21st, late 20s, and certainly 21st century thing that we're seeing on the landscapes nowadays. So etchings are done either by lasers, but more commonly by people with tools, diamond tip tools, and a whole lot of talent and patience that they actually etch the image into the stone material itself. One of the materials that have become very popular on the cemetery landscapes nowadays are black granite, which comes from China, India, the Near and the Far East. And because of that, it's because it's black, it really lends itself to putting an image on it. So all of these three are very, very different, but I've got a face. I've got an image to put with the written information that I see on the stone. So I can pair the two of them together. Should you not be able to find data on a stone, and even if you can, a really fun thing to do, and it certainly is a good diagnostic tool, the images on the stones. So this photograph of this lovely lady and even this bronze bas relief is, you can date them closely by what are they wearing? What's their hairstyle? Look at the mutton chops on this guy. You know, we can look back in history and see when men were wearing their chops like that. We can look at the collars. We can look at the number of buttons. We can look at the hats. We can look at even eyebrows or hairstyles and get an idea of a time period. They are modern people of their time when that image is created, and it's a little window into that particular period of time. And I know it may sound funny that, oh, we put pictures on gravestones? Who puts pictures on gravestones? I want you to make sure that you know what's happening here with this picture on the lower right. So believe it or not, this is a marble gravestone, and it's so dirty, but we've got a little bit of white left so you can see what it looks like, what it would have looked like when it was clean. But that is my beloved webmistress with her really fabulous orange hand warmers that she knit herself. And what she's actually doing with this marvelous stone, she is pulling back this piece of stone that you can see is drilled in over the face of the tablet. And by doing that, what she's revealing is this little opening down here. And there would have been a photograph in that spot. So photography was invented in 1839, gets to the States and explodes pretty quickly. So it becomes something that's available to the masses for a reasonable amount of money by the 1850s. And it would not be unheard of at the time to put a picture on your gravestone. And when you find a stone like this that has that little opening, check the date on the stone. That will help you date perhaps what kind of photograph was in there. And certainly the size of the opening may also help you identify what type of photography it was, whether it was a daguerreotype, a tintype, an ambrotype. Uh, those are probably my big three. But it's not uncommon to see that on 19th century gravestones. And I think that's one of the things that people don't necessarily recognize. Gravestones will tell us about relationships. So marriages, births, adoptions, what's going on with these people? How are we interacting? How are we building families? And how are we growing and moving forward? So this is one of those examples of a black granite. I took a picture of it a really long time ago. It was probably one of the first ones I had ever seen. And I thought it was so interesting because it was black and it had this etching on it, and it's in color. So it was a newfangled thing for me when I found it. And you can tell that it was taken a long time ago because that image right there reflecting is me. And that bright light is the flash of my camera. So I have learned how to take better pictures of them. And over time, and they can be difficult to photograph, but I always get a kick out of that when I see it. But I still continue to use the picture. So I honestly can't tell you. I believe this was taken somewhere in Pennsylvania. It was, I'm not sure how long ago, 15 years ago, maybe. And I don't know these people. And I don't think I could find this again without getting help from the internet. But I learned a lot just by looking at the face of the stone and also by doing some deductive reasoning. So the name is either Valesky or Valesky, depending. I don't even know how it's pronounced, but I can pause it. I can tell over here, I've got a religious figure, so I've got some sort of spirituality. I've got that lovely rainbow and the wild woods in the back. I know that they had a dog. I know that they had 3 lazy cats, like cats come in any other variety. I can do some math, and I can figure out how old Alfred was when he died. I can figure out how long they were married when Alfred died. I can do the age difference between Alfred and Roberta. And as of this picture, a really long time ago, it would appear that Roberta was still with us. When you go into the cemetery and you find these family plots, read them, read each one of them, and start making connections. So what I have here is a husband. I've got a first wife over here on the left, and then 2 more to his left, which is our right. I've got a third wife next to him, which I always thought was funny, and the second wife is over here. So I can spend some time, I can figure out ages, I can figure out relationships. Often a woman's gravestone in the 19th century may bear her maiden name. So we, and particularly in the colonial times, we may have men that if they lose their wife, they may marry a sister or a cousin or another female member of the wife's family. I can do a lot of work here, and I can make a lot of strong suppositions, and that I can then take, and from here I can start building a family tree easily. So I got this guy, I got him with his 3 wives. We've got a lot going on, and if you look closely at his stone, he seems to have been an optimist, because this is his stone that says, with that pointing finger, there is rest in heaven. I don't know how that's possible, buried with those 3 wives so in close proximity, but I hope he found his rest. Gravestones will tell you about relationships like these. The one on the left says Susanna E., and it says, only child of Mr. William and Mrs. Susanna Williston. Only child. So there's some 19th century sentimentality that goes along with that. This child was 8 months old and 20 days, so that probably not the only child, but the first child as well. So it gives you an insight to the emotion and the loss that the family experienced. To my right, I have Miss Judith Nurse, and her stone reads daughter of Mr. John Nurse and an adopted daughter of Mr. Solomon Barnes and Judith, his wife, who died August 7th, AD, which is Latin for Anno Domini, in 1797, in the 19th year of her age. So I've got an adopted child here. And if I figure out who's who, might be able to make two scenarios out of this. My first scenario would be that Judith was the daughter of John and something happened to her father. Her mother, also Judith, remarried Solomon Barnes and adopted the child Judith as his own. My second scenario may be that it's just a coincidence that the daughter and Solomon Barnes' wife Judith is also, they're the same name. It is a biblical name. So it might just be coincidence, and maybe she was an orphan somewhere and they brought her in. But I think in reading this, it's probably more likely that mother remarried to Solomon and Solomon adopted Judith. But we've got this to start as a starting point, and then we can go do research and find some more information and draw some more substantive conclusions. I've got Miss Sally over here on the left. She's the daughter of Mr. Samuel and Mrs. Nancy Butler. And I will tell you that, ladies, we are always something, right? So when you see Miss on a gravestone in the 19th century, I want you to realize that if you see them named Miss, because this Miss Sally here was 20 years old, so that's an indication that she never married. In the middle, I've got Mrs. Catherine Bacon, relict of Major Ebenezer Bacon and formerly widow of Captain Jabez Gay. So again, in the 19th century, in the colonial period, women were tied to men. We were somebody's wife, somebody's daughter, somebody's widow, somebody's former wife, all of that. So what I've got going here is Mrs. Catherine was a smart cookie. She is the relict of, which means another word for widow. She is the widow of Major Ebenezer Bacon, who turns out to be her second husband because previously she was married to Captain Jabez Gay, which gives her the title formerly widow of. She was a widow when he died, but then she got married. And now that she's the relict, so relic, if you take the T off the end of that, it's relic. Remember it that way, that it's what's left over. She is also the widow of Major Ebenezer Bacon, so she married well and outlived them both. On my right, I've got Mrs. Elizabeth Colt, relict. There's that term again of Thomas Cole of Boston. Died January 13th, 1813. AD, again, Latin, Anno Domini. AET, which is an abbreviation for Aetatus, which means at the age of, or attained the age of, 102 years. Now, that is possible. I'm not saying it's not. I will say that there's a lot of things that play into that, but it would be outstanding. It's not unusual to see people that live to be, when I read gravestones, that live to be 80, 90 years old. I certainly do see triple digits periodically. Take this with a little bit of skepticism and do some research. So first of all, do the math. If she died at 102, she was born in 1711. So just take a minute and think about all the things she saw in her lifetime. And there's a couple of things that you also have to keep in mind. When people are born, particularly in the 16 and 1700s, you don't always know when you're born. You don't know your birthday. You don't always get a birth certificate. You're not always registered somewhere. It is up to the towns to send the birth and death, the vital records, births, deaths, and marriages up to the state level. And it wasn't mandatory in the 18th century until later, and I'm not exactly sure of the date. But it doesn't mean that they did it. So you have that you need to consider. You also need to consider that There's also a lot of just family history. Any of you that do genealogy, you know that there's a lot of family stories out there that they're great lore, but they're not necessarily true. The one thing about this gravestone, you can see that it's got an urn at the top of it, which is a little early for 1813. I'm not saying impossible, but a little early. And what I'm actually thinking when I look at this, and particularly at that date, I believe that this stone was probably put up well after her death by some family member. And that might, if there was any family lore about how old she lived to be, that might help perpetuate that myth. Achievements. What did we do while we were here? My friend in California, you might recognize this if you said you were in the Bay Area. This is Oakland Cemetery in Oakland, California. And at the top of the hill is where all the big mausolea are, where all the rich folks are. And Henry Berg was no exception. Well known as the founder of the Association for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, the ASPCA, and also later he founded a similar organization for children. So he managed to get himself a really beautiful Egyptian revival pyramid. It's got the ASPCA seal on it, and then we've got a little bit of blurb here about who he was. And then certainly, this is really what got my attention. The Egyptian revival got my attention, and this statue. And I had no trouble climbing to the top of the hill to find out. So we have him. We're talking about, excuse me. We're talking about who we were, what did we do while we were here. So we may make a big deal about it. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm fairly certain that at least the statuary and the plaques on the front of that were put up in tribute after the fact and not actually put up by Mr. Berg or Berg's family. This is the gravestone for His Excellency William Eustace, born in Cambridge, 1753, died in Boston, 1825. And it goes on to talk about how he was a physician, a member of the National Congress. He was the governor of Massachusetts from 1823 to 1825. So he's got a lot of feathers in his cap. You've got a lot of places to look here if you wanted to do some kind of research on somebody that has all of these credentials. You can look in the physicians' directories. You can look in the business directories around town. Certainly, as a member of Congress and a governor of a state, you would have plenty of information at your able to access in the state and the national records as well. So there's a lot of easy pickings, if you will. You've got at least 3 to 5 really good resources to start when you've got really just this little bit of information. And I use this one because I think it's so lovely. Doesn't matter if you founded a great big organization or you were a member of Congress in this country. I guess at the end of the day, what's important is that you're a good person and a good grandpa with his loving daughter, as detailed here in this really lovely statue of a really, really lovely Victorian, well-to-do family, granddaughter dancing with grandpa. And it's all lovable and sentiment, and it certainly is beautiful. But let's be honest, you had to have some money to put up something like that. And this is Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, New York. Education. What did we do with ourselves? How far did we go? What did we learn? Where did we go to school? So that photo on the left is a photo ceramic. And I've got what looks to be a young woman with a megaphone on her sweater and initials on that megaphone. So I'm going to put her as a teenager. I am going to put her on the pep squad or the cheerleading squad. And then the initials FHS, I can do some quick deductive reasoning and go, well, HS is probably high school because that's where pep rallies and cheerleaders often are. So am I in an F town? Am I in Framingham? Am I in Farmington? Am I in Franklin? If I'm not, what towns that start with that letter F am I around? Is she local? And then I can go out from there. But oftentimes, chances are pretty good I'm standing in the town where that might be from. On the right, I have got a gravestone for a minister, and those little cuties, one on each side. So if you attended before, I'll tell you anyway. But this up here, this is called the shoulder, and this is a colonial gravestone, and this is the tympanum where the art is contained. And then I've got another shoulder here. So these two cutie pies on each shoulder are a visual cue that I've got a minister here. He's got his ecclesiastical robes on. He's holding a little Bible. And the clergy went to Harvard Divinity School, first college founded in this country. Yale came right up behind. And in New England, in Massachusetts, if you were going to divinity school, you went to Harvard. So very often when you find ministers like that, you will find where they were educated as well as where they served their community and for how long in the clergy. So I told you that when you look at pictures on gravestones, that what you see is what you get. And I made the caveat that that's not the case on colonial New England gravestones. This is true. So while I've got a picture here, this is a cameo because I've got him carved in this circular. I've got him carved in the round like this. So it's a cameo. It is not the minister Nathan Holt. It is not meant to look like Reverend Nathan Holt. It is meant to be the idea that he was a man of the clergy. So again, like the last one we saw, he's got the ecclesiastical robes on, he's got the collar, he certainly has the English wig on. And when you look at stones like this here in New England, for ministers in this period, so mid-17s and maybe a little bit before and maybe a little bit after, certain carvers did these kind of stones for ministers, and the carvers carved in particular styles, and you'll see similarities between the carvings on the stone. So another indicator that it isn't of the individual itself. So I've got the information here that he was a minister and where he served and how long he served. And what it says is that he was the pastor of the Second Church of Danvers. Well, that's fabulous. This gravestone is in Peabody, Massachusetts, not Danvers, Massachusetts, where he was pastor for the Second Church. So now I got to figure out, well, if he was a minister in Danvers and I'm in Peabody, what happened? So not hard to figure out. You can look it up. You can do it right there with your smartphone in the cemetery. Peabody, the town of Peabody, was established in 1855 from Danvers. Danvers was established in 1752 from Salem, and then Salem was established in 1630. So at the time that he was working, it was two of these towns and later became the third town. So you need to keep that in mind. Just because you're looking at a gravestone in a graveyard in a particular town, particularly again in New England, because of our age, large towns often split off over time. So where you're standing may not be the original town that it is today. Information on gravestones of our occupations. Dr. Susan S. McKinney Stewart. As you read below, it says wife, always wife first, right? 19th century, what are you going to do? Wife, mother, and physician. And that really caught my attention. This is, I believe, Greenwood in New York, a Greenwood Cemetery. And it was so interesting to me that I have a woman who's a doctor that died in 1918, at the age of 62, 72. So that means that she was practicing in the last quarter, probably practicing in the last quarter of the 1800s, which for women, a very unusual feat. So, go ask your friend Google and see what you can find. And I did. I just Googled her name, and this was what I came up with. And it was only a small part of her biography that I found. She was the first African American woman physician in New York State, and the third in the United States. She was graduated valedictorian of her class in 1870 from the New York Medical College for Women, because God forbid we let the women and the men study together. And she practiced medicine in Brooklyn and Manhattan from 1870 to 1895. Quite an amazing achievement, a rather humble gravestone, but just with a few words, it led me to do research, just quick research, to find all of that information, and certainly made me want to read on and learn more. When people have their own businesses, sometimes they want to put their business card on their gravestone. So that's what we have here. This is a giant gravestone, and this is actually in New Jersey. Looks like we would have had a photo ceramic here on the left in this empty spot, and one here on the right. So I would guess one for Ricky on the left and one for Rita on the right, and then a picture of Ricky and Rita together on another photo ceramic here in the center. It is a modern stone. Tells me that Ricky left to Jesus June 22nd, 1988. And down below, he wanted to say, or his family wanted to say, what he did. So here's his business card. RD Engineering, so RD, Ricky Demetro, I'm sorry, specializing in regrinding and microprocessing. President Ricky Demetro, Chicago, Illinois. Well, like I said, this gravestone is in New Jersey. I did try to find some information about this to see if I could find anything just very cursory online about him. If I wanted to know more, I could certainly look up and find out what regrinding and microprocessing was. I'm going to do a little deductive and say this sounds like some early computer stuff. As well, or maybe not. I'm using micro. Anyway, there you go. Sometimes your deductions aren't always right. But if I really needed to know, I would also not only look locally in the directories of that New Jersey township area I was in, but I might also go snoop around in Chicago in this particular type of industry to see what I could find there. And I would be a very bad gravestone girl if I didn't include a gravestone carver. When you're looking at gravestones, look at all of them. Look at the art. Look at the lettering. Read the words on the colonial stuff. Look at the orientation. And don't forget to look down. You may very well find a maker's mark. This is at the bottom of a colonial New England slate gravestone. It's actually rather late, but in the colonial period, it might actually even be 19th century. I don't recall. But down here, it says, engraved by Israel Reed, Worcester. So that's my hometown. So I want to tell you a couple of things here in addition. This, where you see this looks like an F, right? Well, it wouldn't be from, wouldn't make any sense, right? It wouldn't be Ephrael, even though it's got a crossbar on it. This is an Old English S. So it's just fancy, it's pretty. And when you do something like it over here, where you take that S and you attach it to the next letter, like he did, like the carver did here with the T in Worcester, it is called a ligature. And it is fancy, it is pretty, and it allows the carver to keep working, move right into the next letter without having to stop and lift his chisel. So it even saves him a little bit of time. But even on modern stones, you may find maker's marks. If you wanted to know who this was, or who's Israel Reed, well, he's from Worcester, he's a carver. Now I can go to the Historical Society. I can, again, go to the business directories of the day. I can look at the census records. I can look at the tax rolls. I can find a lot of information with just a little bit of information gleaned off the face of the gravestone. And we have military service. I'm going to do one quick thing. Okay, good job. I will often check in on the chats during these just to make sure somebody isn't frantically writing me saying, "Oh my God, we can't hear you." So, other things we do with ourselves. Gravestones will tell us military service. This says William McIntyre, Esquire, and there again is that where it says Esquire. There's that old English S that looks like an F, but Esquire. He was a major in the army under General Pepperell at the reduction of Cape Breton, A.D. Anno Domini, 1744. So I can do a lot of surfing around looking for this stuff. I can look in 18th century military records for this guy as a general. I can also, I'm sorry, as a major. I can also try and find General Pepperell. But before I did any of that, I had to look up what the reduction of Cape Breton was. And what I learned was that it was part of King George's War from 1744 to 1748. Cape Breton is an island up in Canada where the French were, and the French and the British were battling it out. And the battle happened because the British were they had to take this fort on Cape Breton in the St. Lawrence Waterway as a way to be able to continue up the St. Lawrence Waterway to be able to get up to Quebec and invade Quebec. So it was something I didn't even know the type of excursion we were involved in here. So, just being able to look up battles gives you a start, and then you can start looking at military records that way. You can find where people were wounded and what hospitals they went to or where they were killed, and you learn about other battles. There's a lot, again, with just a few words. I will tell you that this gravestone is in Pepperell, Massachusetts, and which I'm going to guess was so named because of General Pepperell, who was probably from there. And if he was a general, he was probably a pretty important dude in the area. Francis Washburn, this tablet says that he was a brevet brigadier general, Colonel 4th Regiment, Massachusetts Cavalry, died 22nd April, 1865, of wounds received at High Bridge, Virginia, 6 April, 1865, age 26 years. So there is a tremendous amount going on here. This was something else I had to look up when I first found this gravestone. Brevet Brigadier General. To be breveted is to be moved from one rank to another without actually passing through the acts of service. He didn't have to go through all the hoops to move from colonel to brigadier general. He was breveted typically done by the president, and it's also often done posthumously after death. So it's a sign of respect for the service. If you died in the military during a skirmish, if you were breveted up to another level, it's a sign of respect and appreciation for the sacrifice. So he was the colonel in the Massachusetts Cavalry. So he died the 22nd of April from wounds he received the 6th of April. So he hung around for a while. He received his wounds at High Bridge, Virginia. So you should be able to find him in hospital logs in any of the hospitals that might have been in the area in Virginia where that battle would have taken place. He may have actually died in prison if he was captured, which may be why he was breveted after the fact. But he kind of he died for the 1865, so we've got the Civil War, and he didn't get to hang around long enough to enjoy the outcome of the Civil War. So that's a ton of things you can find, all from just, what's that, a handful of words. Hobbies and interests. What did we do with our free time? Who were we? What did we do? What did we enjoy doing? On the left, I've got a young man. So there's another piece of black granite etched into it, a young man with his guitar. So if I've got somebody with a musical instrument shown on their gravestone, they like to play, and they probably were good at it, my guess, or at least wanted to be remembered as being good at it. That bench says, "Come sit, enjoy the sun, listen to some music," and that phrase, "Let your soul shine." Again, ask your friend, Mr. Google. It is a great. It's easy to do to find out what this stuff is from. That actually happens to be a line from an Allman Brothers song. Mr. Featherstone on the left is apparently going to spend eternity fishing, and not just fishing, but looks like he's fishing big game. This might be in life. He had a boat and he led chartered fishing excursions. He might have liked to fish, and it certainly, that is a very particular fish. It's a big fish. It's not a sailfish. It's a, word's escaping me, but it's a big sport fish. So maybe he did it as his job. Maybe he did it because he enjoyed it. I'm always joke that the proportions on this gravestone looks like he's going to need a bigger boat. I don't know who this guy was, but I know he liked to go fast. I've got a plane on the left and I've got a fast car on the right. Maybe he was a pilot. Maybe he traveled a lot. And when he came home, that was probably his favorite girl in the garage, but don't tell his wife. We want to show what we enjoyed with our free time, and I see a lot of sports fans up there on the Guarnieri stone. I've got a diehard Red Sox fan, maybe one, maybe both, or there's actually 3 people on that stone. We want to show our loyalty to our teams even after we're no longer sitting in the living room watching them on TV or out in the stands. And down below, this picture down here with all these flowers, if your flowers, if someone sends you flowers, an arrangement at your funeral that is a royal straight flush, which is exactly what that is up here. I got an ace, king, queen, jack. Should be a 10 in there. You were a good poker player, no doubt about it. And this other set of flowers down here is a calendar. And at first, I thought it was a lottery card or something, which I was hoping that I had like a big casino player or something like that. But it actually turns out to be a calendar. And the spot right there on the 15th was empty. So I'm going to assume that that person died on the 15th, even though here I can do all of that deduction and I have no gravestone to go with. Not yet, anyway. Fraternal and social affiliations. What did we do as a group in the community? There are all sorts of benevolent societies that do community work, that do work for society on a small level and on a state and local level, and also on a national level. So I've just got a very small handful of them here. Starting on the left, my left. I guess it's your left too, right? I've got the Daughters of the Confederacy. I've got KFC, which are the Knights of Columbus. BPOE, the Benevolent, forget what the P stands for, Order of Elks. I've got the Daughters of the American Revolution over here on the right. I have got, in the middle, I've got the Freemasons. So they originally were for people in the mason trade, in the brick and stone trade, which it's got a tremendous amount of symbols on it all by itself, the square and compass in the Bible. And if you look closely, I got a lot of religious symbols on here as well. So over here on the right is the female, but men were allowed in too, the Order of the Eastern Star. So a five-pointed star, and around it, it says fatal, which I always really loved. And I've finally learned to remember it is fairest among thousands, altogether lovely. That's what the fatal is. Which is actually a biblical passage, Song of Songs. And that's one of the things when you see a lot of abbreviations, they may be the name of the organization. Like here is P of H, so Patrons of Husbandry. That's the Grange. You may also find, at first blush, you look fatal. What is this? These ladies are fatal. Well, of course they are, because girls travel in squads. So, but then if you dig down, very often what you'll find the acronyms are from biblical passages, songs, hymns, that kind of thing, religious songs, or pieces of poetry, particularly in the colonial period when a number of those kind of organizations were founded. Movement and travel. We tend to think that the people that lived before us 100, 200 plus years ago, they didn't get around. We tend to think of that they just kind of stayed home and they didn't do much, but no, they were really traveling all over the place. And you may move from somewhere and live in another place. You may move somewhere and you may not get there. So what we have here on the left is I've got the husband, and then I've got his wife down below, and it says that she's buried in Arlington. Then I've got a bunch of her siblings. So this is in Massachusetts. I assume that she's buried in Arlington, Massachusetts, which is just a couple of towns over from where this stone is. But it's very interesting to me that her husband is here, she's not, and the husband is with all of a number of the other family members. Maybe she remarried. That's always something that you have to think about, that maybe you get buried with the first husband and he's someplace else, or you get buried with the second husband and not the first and he's someplace else. So you have to keep that in mind. On the right, I've got a stone for Richard Holmes, who, if you read on, was drowned in the Pacific Ocean near the port of Lima. That would be Lima, Peru, in 1828. And if you read on that stone, it says that it was erected by his two surviving brothers. And that one is in Plymouth, Mass. So here I have two examples of what's called a cenotaph, and the description, the definition is at the bottom. A cenotaph is being memorialized on a marker, but there's no body buried there. So on the left, it says that she's buried in Arlington. So I know she's not there, even though she's on the stone. And the deduction I can do with Richard is that if you are drowned in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Lima, Peru, you fell off a boat somewhere and they were unable to retrieve the body. So I've got his name on a marker erected by surviving family members as a memorial, someplace for the family to go, some way to tell the story. It tells me what happened to him. It tells me where it happened. And it keeps the story alive and keeps the memory alive. Here's my favorite: methods of death. Accident, disease, war, all those kind of things. We're all going out somehow. Particularly on my colonial stones, we see a lot of mention of how somebody was killed, how they died, whether it was a disease, whether they were killed in some battle or died of the wounds, like we saw with that breveted brigadier general. When you see cause of death on colonial gravestones, like this one on the left that says killed by the fall of the tree, the idea was everybody gets up and thinks they're going to have a normal day, but anything could happen. And particularly for the colonials, death was around every corner. Anything, you could be here 1 minute and gone the next. And so you were to be prepared to meet your mortality by the works that you did, the good works that you did. You were needed to be prepared to meet meet your maker at any point in time. So this guy got up in the morning, thought he was going to have a normal day, doing some work around the farm. Got to go take that tree down. Well, the tree took him down instead. And if you actually read a little close on that, underneath his name, it says late of Ireland. I can't quite read that. But if I want to now I've got a whole international channel to go down. And often when you see where people are from, you'll often find multiple stones with people from the same region. Groups tend to come, and then friends and family and other people, will come, and they will want to congregate together. The one on the right, the gravestone on the right, is in Connecticut, and it's truly one of my favorites. It says that Mr. Thomas Dale, it says, in memory of Mr. Thomas Dale, who casually fell from Springfield Bridge December 26th, died the 27th, 1814, in the 30th year of his age. Casually fell. Think about that for a minute. So this is where I tell you that a lot of times when you see words and you put them in modern context, they don't mean the same. So this sounds really funny if we say he casually fell from a bridge, but if you look at the way the word casually was used in the 18th and 19th century, it means accidental. So this guy accidentally fell from the Springfield Bridge. Now, that might be a nice euphemism for suicide if we wanted to get real about it. And it's something to entertain. But also here, maybe we take note of the date. So fell from the bridge December 26th, so the day after December 25th, day after Christmas. Christmas, as we celebrate it today as a family holiday, didn't start out that way. It was an adult holiday. It was kind of like Halloween, and it was for mischief making and running around drunk through the streets and pounding on everybody's doors asking for food. And it was not the Christmas trees and Christmas presents and that we know of it today. Around this period is when it starts to become a more commercialized holiday and becomes more family oriented and less of a wild madcap party. But because of this time period and knowing that, he may have been a reveler that thought he could fly. He did manage to survive this casual fall for whatever reason that it happened, but he died the next day. And I will tell you, one of the places to look for this kind of stuff is in newspapers of the time. They love to write about everything that was going on, particularly things that would be sort of sensational. If you look at any of those old newspapers of the 19th century and the colonial period, they are chock full of itty bitty little words, tiny, tiny print, lots of words, and a lot of stories. So I don't think actually either of these incidents, and particularly the casual fall from the bridge, would have not gone unnoticed by the newspapers. I think that probably would have made for quite the story. And it would have made for quite the story when it happened, when they fished him out of the river on the 26th, and then a follow-up story when he died on the 27th. And then there would probably be more information. It comes back in the newspaper when his funeral, if he had a funeral, which typically, but never say never, the newspaper would have talked about his funeral. It would have announced the services, and then it would rehash what had happened. So, newspaper journalism, little difference today. So everything's a story. You get information on the front, and you find out what happened by doing some digging with the information that you get. This is Martha Brooks. There's that word consort again, wife of. And it says, who died of the smallpox, taken the natural way, November 28th, 1792. Very often, smallpox or other disease, people that die of other types of diseases like diphtheria, dropsy, which is edema, what we call edema today. Apoplexy, it was called apoplexy then, it's called a stroke today. That's all very often used on the faces of old gravestones. It is just to confirm the idea of being human, and that you could be here today and you could get sick and you could die tomorrow or the next day or the next day. So it is often, the cause of death from disease is often placed on the stones, particularly here in the colonial period and in the 19th century. And if you find one when you're in a graveyard, make note of the date, at least make note of the year, but certainly the date will help. And then see, can you find some more 1792s? Can you find more November, December, January? Can I find a 3, 4, 5 month window that would lead me to the idea that I had an epidemic here? Rarely are you going to have one smallpox victim. Again, never say never, but you can often chart patterns of disease like that. And outbreaks of things like smallpox and diphtheria, yellow fever, that stuff ran in cycles. And you can see it recurring around here with smallpox in particular every 30 to 60 years or so, and you can chart outbreaks that way. I have one single stone that has 5 young children on it. They are the 5 children of the Bridge family. I've got the first one on the left died October 9th, 1760, then November 20th, then December 20th, then December 21st. And then almost a full year later, I've got December 19th, 1761. So as sad as this is, it tells me a tremendous amount. I've got 4 children that died within 3 months of each other in 1760. Something happened. Here, I might have some kind of outbreak. And one of the first things I would do is look at the historic record and see, for the town that this is in and the area that it's in, and it is in Massachusetts, if there was some kind of outbreak, particularly smallpox in our area in 1760. Also, know that this stone is no older than that last death date. That's one stone. I've got 5 entries on it. Certainly, when you have 4 family members die in such close proximity, you're grief stricken. You may not have the money for this either. So maybe I don't put anything up until I have to later. Maybe a year goes by. I've saved the money to put up the stone for my children, and I've lost another one. So now is the time to do it because I have the money to do it. You don't always get a gravestone when you die. And that is true today as well, particularly as they are quite expensive. Can be quite expensive. So somebody may have a gravestone erected for them in close proximity to the death, a year after, 5 years later. One of the other things you have to take into consideration is maybe they never got one, and then the family descendants come and put something up. If we're lucky, they'll make a note on it somewhere, have it engraved that it was erected by the 9th generation or something like that. And also, one more thing. Often, particularly with my colonial gravestones here in New England, often I will have descendants come and replace old gravestones if they're broken, or if they want to put up something that they feel is more fitting to those ancestors. So the gravestone doesn't always go up when you die, and the gravestone does not always fit the period of the death. So keep that in mind as well. And my beautiful trumpeting Gabriel up there in that tympanum coming out of his horn, it says, "Arise, ye dead," which is another biblical passage. This tablet reads, "Here lies buried the body of Mr. Noah Brooks, who departed this life February 18th, 1790, in the 57th year of his age. He was a virtuous, peaceable, useful member of society. His funeral was attended with this mournful circumstance that his eldest daughter, Mrs. Betty Fry, who died in a few hours after her father and was placed in the grave at the same time." This is a perfect example of the need for punctuation. I need some commas in there to make this make more sense. When Zipporah and I found this, we sat and read it out loud several times before we actually got the flow of the story. And the story goes a little more like this. His funeral was attended with this mournful circumstance that his eldest daughter, Mrs. Betty Fry, comma, two commas before that, who died in a few hours after her father, comma, and was placed in the grave at the same time. So, bunch of things going on there. Once you read through it, you realize that something happened, that his daughter died hours after her father, and says was placed in the grave at the same time. Not in the same grave. They weren't both buried together in the same hole. They were both buried at the same time. So they ended up with a double funeral. I happen to know that in this particular town, Brooks was a big family name, and certainly even if they weren't, go back and check your newspapers for February 18th, 1920 of 1790, and I am sure that this would have been written about. The idea that a notable family member, a notable person in town has passed, but also the idea that the daughter passed just a few hours after her father, and they went from a single funeral to a double funeral. We might have something happening here. Again, make note of the date. Do I have some kind of societal sickness like an outbreak, or maybe I just had some illness within the family that caused both the daughter and the father to be ill and die within close proximity of each other. You should also take a look around at the other gravestones that surround this, and do I have more Brooks, and do I have more people in that same timeline? It might give you some insight to some sort of family tragedy, a fire, or the flu, or food poisoning, or an outbreak of some variety. Take a look around at the surrounding stones and see if you can find anybody else that might fit into the pattern that befell the Brooks family. And we're winding down. I know I've been talking about this forever, but I'm going to leave this up while I chat about them. If you would like to screenshot them, please be my guest. Take a picture with your phone, whatever. These are really important sites you need to know if you're looking for information. Certainly, top of your list is Gravestone Girls. That would be us, in case you did not know. Of course, you know that. Find a Grave. If you don't know Find a Grave, it is a crowdsourced website where people take pictures of gravestones and document cemeteries and basically create one giant database that you can search online. These are all online. You can search it online by cemetery. You can search it by person. There's a whole repository of famous people. It's a great resource for finding things, particularly finding pictures. I will say there is a huge caveat that there is a lot of poor information, or outright incorrect, let's just call it what it is, outright incorrect information on Find a Grave. But it is a good place to start, particularly if you're looking for somebody from farther away that you can't just trundle out to the cemetery and go look for them. And also know that Find a Grave has an app for your phone. So you put the app on your phone and you go someplace and you're like, I wonder where all the cemeteries are. And you open your Find a Grave app, it will geolocate you. And then you can drill down through the app to see what cemeteries are around you. And then you can click through and it will connect you with Google Maps to then give you GPS to get to that location. That's a really fabulous tool to have in your gravestone tool belt. The Association for Gravestone Studies, they are an organization of just what it says, of gravestone studies, all things gravestone, whether they're art, carvers, geology, historians, you name it. Our members are myriad. Anybody that has any kind of interest in gravestones for any reason is involved with this organization. They've been around for about 40 years. You can go to their website, sign up for their e-newsletter. You don't have to be a member. And if you do become a member, tell them Gravestone Girls sent you. But if you do become a member, you get a number of publications that are driven by the members, people writing articles for the different quarterly and annual publications. And there's also Gravestone Camp. So that's a fancy, that is what we call it. It's actually the annual conference. And the thing that makes it really, really great is that it moves around every year. So it's 4 days, 2 days of indoor study, 2 days of road work, going out and seeing cemeteries in whatever state you're in. They organize all of that stuff. So it's a great experience. I've been going for as long as I've been a member. I've met some of my best friends, some really fabulous people through that organization. I definitely need you to know about the Farber Gravestone collection. And this link is a little wonky. If you can't get to it, just Google Farber Gravestone collection and you'll get to it. But you should follow the one that points you to Luna Commons. The Farbers were a husband and wife team that were working with real cameras and real film in the 1970s. They are some of the founding members, actually, of the Association for Gravestone Studies. And they were out there taking pictures of gravestones to document them, but also to do gravestone carver identification and build a repository for it. And again, help with actually identifying colonial New England gravestone carvers. Rarely are those stones of that period signed. Once in a while they are. But to identify a gravestone carver is a lot like doing genealogy work, where you go to probate and you look for a payment to somebody for a gravestone. And then if you have a payment to somebody for a gravestone or for carving a gravestone, lettering a gravestone, then you know that person carved that stone. Now you move on. The next time you find another one that looks like it, you go back through the same genealogy practice and see if you can identify through the probate records. By the time the Farbers were done taking pictures of gravestones, they had almost 14,000 images. The entire collection lives at this next place on the list, the American Antiquarian Society, and they have digitized it. So that's what the online Farber collection at Luna Commons link will take you to. It's a digitized collection. It is amazing. It's certainly not complete, but it is pretty comprehensive. It is siftable by state, which again is New England. There is some outside the New England area, but not much. Siftable by state, by town, by carver, by symbol, by date range. You can really parse it out. And one of the things that is the most fabulous about the Farber Gravestone collection is it has pictures of gravestones that may still be on the cemetery landscape or may not, as they looked 50 years ago. So it's an amazing repository for that kind of information. After the American Antiquarian Society, so the American Antiquarian Society is based here in Worcester. They are interested in all society papers, as you will, printed paper up until 1850. If it's printed up until 1850, they want it. Diaries, magazines, pamphlets, broadsides, photographs, books, maps, atlases, you name it, they got it. And they've got an amazing, amazing collection. They've been around here since the 1800s. Some of their stuff is online. If you are close by, you can schedule an appointment to visit. If you are not close by, they can help you with researching their collection remotely. Next one up, New England Historic Genealogical Society. These guys that we call them New England HistGen, they are located in Boston. They are very similar to the American Antiquarian Society from a genealogical point of view. They're a little bit like the Mormons in the idea of the keepers of history. They're not, I won't call them quite as comprehensive, but they certainly do have a tremendous amount of New England genealogy dating back to our first settlements here. Then again, books, diaries, pictures. They have a membership. They do a weekly newsletter. You actually don't have to be a member for that. Their membership will allow you access to their online databases, which is a really fantastic genealogical research tool. There is Also, New England Regional Genealogical Consortium. We lovingly call them NERC. The G is silent. They again they are made up of different regional genealogy groups. They come together every other year and do a symposium. They do a rotating conference where you spend 4 days, I believe, in classes, learning amazing things from amazing speakers. And of course, there's a vendor room. And then New Hampshire Old Graveyard Association, Rhode Island Historical Cemetery Commission, Cape Cod Gravestones, Vermont Old Cemetery Association, Maine Old Cemetery Association, and last one on that list, the Connecticut Gravestone Network. These are all local or state gravestone association, cemetery groups with their own wonderful membership and their own wonderful researchers and their own wonderful repositories. Many of them have online databases that you can go and peruse. You can see data about the people. You can see data about the cemeteries. You can see pictures of the gravestones. These are all really, really fabulous New England historic resources. So we use them all the time. I could make many, many more. I have a lot more of these on the Learn section of our website, as well as some downloadable printable handouts of symbolism and meaning. So a lot of the stuff that I talked about in tonight's program, and certainly the last program about symbolism. So you're welcome to download those, print them out, put them in your cemetery bag, and use all of these resources to help you get answers to all the questions that you had, plus all the new ones you come up with when you go out there on the road. So I am going to wind up here with my beautiful family, my colonials. These ladies were chasing down their colonial ancestors, and we found them. My job here, as always, is to teach you that cemeteries are fun places. They are educational spots. They are really living history museums that are free and an invaluable resource for genealogists and explorers alike. I want you to get out there. I want you to explore. I want you to know what you're looking at. If you can't find something, you don't know what something is, look at the resources I've given you tonight. Drop us a line, post it on Facebook or Instagram for us. And show us what you've got going on out there. I've got folks here tonight from Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Ohio, California. I've been in a lot of your spaces, and you've got great stuff, but I can't be everywhere. So I always see new things. So you're probably seeing things that I haven't before, and I want everybody to be able to talk about it, play with it, learn from it, and enjoy it. So I'm going to end my program here. I am going to get us back up here. I'm going to take a quickie peek at the chats. We'll go back up to the top because now I know how to do this. So Valerie asked a question with the Valesky headstone or the Valeskys. For the time frame, I will guess that animals were probably not allowed to be buried. We're just really allowing that, at least out here in the East. You might be ahead of us in California. But they are, there are a lot of people that sneak the ashes in, but you didn't hear me say that. And Valerie, I'm with you. I love the Egyptian revival. Thank you. Marlin. You would think I would know that that was a Marlin on that gravestone because I have a 9-foot one, an antique one, up on the wall in one of my rooms here in the house. Metal-looking marker on the Noah Brooks grave. Okay, so the metal marker on the Noah Brooks grave, that little round thing. Let me see if I can move this. Oh, I can. So that little round medallion that was at the foot of Noah Brooks's gravestone, and Noah Brooks was the one that died, and then his daughter died a few hours later. That is actually a flag holder, and it is probably made out of bronze, or nowadays, because the bronze ones were always getting stolen, they've replaced them with plastic so that they will discourage people from stealing them. And that marker said that he was it was a Revolutionary War flag holder. So it's the Massachusetts medallion for the Revolutionary War soldiers, and then it's got a slot in the back where you put the flag in. We have many veterans, and I think this is kind of a universal thing. Many veterans that go around on Veterans Day, Memorial Day, and put flags out, and those are the flag holders that hold those, that show what war he fought in, as well as hold the flag to memorialize him. Let's see what else it says. Lucy wants to know, for the gravestone for the 5 children, would they've all been buried in that one spot? Yeah, I believe they would have been. It's actually a much bigger stone than you think. And it's interesting because I don't think of it because I can actually see it. I've been there and I've visited. That stone is probably, I would say, it's probably about 4 feet across, and probably it's probably about 5 feet across, and probably about 3.5 feet high. It's a pretty big piece of slate. One of the things that probably makes it look like that is that stone is always in the shade. I can never get there at the time of day. It wouldn't matter what time of day I got there, unless I brought an artificial light source with me, a mirror or something, to light the face of the stone. I cannot get the whole thing. So it does make it look smaller than it is, but it is a fairly large stone, and I don't have any doubt that they're all buried there. They were also pretty young children, some just several months, and I don't recall specifically, but maybe no more than just a couple of years. So. And do we have anybody else? Yeah. Consort. Consort is another word for wife. So I used to be under the misconception that consort meant she died first, and then when you saw the term relic, I used to be under the misconception that consort meant, she died first, and relic meant that she died after her husband. So consort, I used to think consort meant predeceased the husband, and relic is just another word for widow. I have since learned better. It is not the case. Consort is just simply, it's another word for companion, it's another word for wife. But relic with a T, that T on the end, is indeed for another word for widow, meaning that she outlived her husband. All righty. So, kids, I don't know if I can figure out. I thought I could figure out how to unmute you guys. You can unmute yourselves, I believe. So, can I help anybody before we call it a night? I can't see you. Y'all didn't put your cameras on.
Okay, we will.
There you are. I see you. Yeah. Now y'all come in. Good job. Excellent. Hey. Oh, you know what? I owe you so much information, Roseanne. We're going to talk. We will talk some more.
That sounds good.
Excellent. I thank you all for coming. I have familiar faces from last time's talk. I see your comments on Facebook and Instagram. Like I said, share what you've got. Show me what's out there in your cemeteries. Keep an eye out. We'll be doing, like I said, we'll be doing more programming. We're introducing new product all the time. We're participating in all sorts of different markets, all virtual. It's safe. I haven't filled my car with a tank of gas in, I don't know, a couple months now. But, tell me what you're doing. Show me what you're doing. Keep an eye out. Like I said, I'm going to try and figure out how to do a gravestone rubbing program where not only do I talk about how it's done and you know, the pros and cons and the rules and all that kind of stuff. And we'll also talk about gravestones themselves and what the rules might be in a cemetery about what you can and can't do with your modern stones and your modern plots and all of that. I just have to figure out how to set it up so that you can, I could actually do a demonstration and you could see it. So I'm going to work with the webmistress on that. I'm hoping to have a program next month for that. So stay tuned. Have a wonderful night, everybody. Thank you so much
Thank you
for
so much.
coming.
Thank you. It was great.
It's good to see everybody. I hope you all got a screenshot of those resources, and make sure to
Yes.
look up the resources online as well, because there's a lot more. There's all kinds of stuff. We have conservators out there. We have gravestone carvers. We have organizations. We've got some information about cleaning that comes from the National Park Service, from the Center for Preservation Technology and Training. So we try to be as comprehensive as possible. So excellent. All right. I love you all, guys. Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. Have a great night.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Bye.
Bye.
Night.